What brings you here today?
Well, I felt like I should talk to someone because I suppose I've been sort of struggling with a habit that has been becoming more noticeable since I've been in school, because I have more, I feel like I have more responsibilities, and this habit is kind of, I suppose, a bit of a threat to me fulfilling those responsibilities regularly. The habit, I guess, is it doesn't feel too serious yet, but I worry it could become more serious in the future, as it has been known to with other people. So I've been drinking probably most nights for the last maybe year or so. I guess that started maybe last winter, and then kind of picked up in the summer when I had more time, and you go out and drink in the sunny weather and stuff. It's just more conducive to that kind of thing. So that's when the habit started to grow, and I suppose it's kind of just kept going as school has begun, and now I'm starting to notice it more.
It seems like that you're acknowledging where what's something that you just like to do is turning into going to a direction that you don't necessarily like anymore, and you've identified that this is like a threat towards your goals, perhaps at school or other things. And I think that it's important that you were able to realize that you know what there's an issue and what you want to do about it.
Yeah, it's taken a while to acknowledge it, but I feel like it's time, because of the consequences it could have on things, certain things that are important to me, like getting through school successfully and practical things like that.
And how have you been coping with this so far, since it sounds like it's been happening for a while now?
I think I've just been coping with it because it hasn't been so detrimental yet. It feels like it's starting to verge on the point of having some negative consequences, and that's why I feel like it's worth talking about. But other than that, it's been easy enough to cope with, because I'm still able to kind of fulfill all my responsibilities, and I enjoy it, so it's something to look forward to at night. So it's pretty easy to cope with so far.
Sounds like you're very good at managing this thing that you've identified that might be a problem in the future, but it's not a problem for you now. So I think you're very a well-prepared guy, because you're taking preemptive measures. Well, this drinking thing, I like it a lot, and but you're worried that perhaps in the future it might go the wrong direction. So you're already starting to think about this issue, and perhaps you might think about, well, maybe should I cut back a little bit with drinking, or is there anything I can do to change my behavior around it?
Yeah, I suppose I haven't really talked to anyone else about it yet, but it's, for some reason, it started to take up more of my attention as of late, because I've just noticed small things where it's kind of affecting some of my duties or my abilities. Yes.
Sounds like you're very observant, that where you have your usual goals fulfilled, but now once those goals aren't being fulfilled all the way, you're starting to worry about it. And I think that's very knowledgeable, that you know about yourself, and you know about what your own duties you want to fulfill. I think that speaks a lot about you.
see that too, but I also I feel that it's kind of an issue of willpower, which I sometimes feel I'm lacking, because even while being aware of the very realistic consequences of continuing in this kind of pattern, I still tend to choose the most instantly gratifying option, instantly gratifying but not long-term gratifying option. So I suppose the main issue I feel I have to address is my willpower, or something like that, or discipline, self-discipline. I don't know exactly what it is.
I think it took a lot of willpower that you're able to talk about this with someone else, because as you mentioned, you've never been able to talk about this problem for anyone else, and I think that's a great first step. You've already acknowledged that you typically want to take the instantly gratifying way, and you wish you'd be more long term because you want to care about the long term goals. So I think you already have like most of the parts there, and I think you already have some of the willpower because you're able to talk about this with me in a session. And I think maybe is that something maybe you could like channel into when you're thinking about like drinking to. Because then you seem to be very well prepared about this. Maybe
I feel like I'm well prepared when it comes to trying to rationalize it, or when it's early in the day and it's not an imminent question of whether I will drink or not. I feel in those situations I'm well prepared. It's looking back on it, it's when I'm kind of on the fence and it's 6 o'clock or whatever, and I think, oh, a beer would go nice with dinner, and then it's usually I go for the beer 90% of the time, unless there's some other reason other than me not wanting it to become a very strong pattern. Like that's a reason that's always there, but it's only when I have another reason to back that up that I'm able to choose to abstain. So I guess that those reasons are like if I do have an assignment due the next morning that I have to work all night on or something, and I know that drinking beer won't help with that, then that will help, and maybe. If I was to be driving somewhere or something like that, that could be another one. But on its own, when it's just left to something like abstaining for the sake of my pattern, the willpower doesn't seem to be there.
It seems like that. In my opinion, you already have a lot of willpower because you know when there's like a sense of urgency, like when you have to do an assignment or like a project, you would choose not to drink, even though you say that you drink 90% of the time. The 10% of the time you don't drink is when you recognize that there's something important, like when you have to do a project in the morning. You said yourself that you tend not to drink. And or when you need like your wits for driving, you also abstain from drinking, and I think that's a very difficult thing to do for other people. And you only drink, well, most of the time when you have nothing urgent to do tomorrow morning, so there's no reason for you not to drink because you fulfilled your duties. So I think that shows that you're very well prepared, that you do what's needed for you, and when it's not needed, and when you don't have to do anything else, then it's time for a drink. Yeah,
I suppose fear is that that if I go for a stretch of time again, like especially seems to happen in the summer and stuff, where I don't have any other responsibilities that might weigh on the side against having a drink, that I'll just consistently choose to drink because there's doesn't seem to be much of a reason not to, and then that will establish a very strong pattern, which I feel is already starting to be formed. But something like that seems like it could really kind of cement that even stronger pattern, which would be hard to kind of get free from. So that's, I suppose that's why I've come to talk about how to address it, nip it in the bud, so to speak, before it gets out of my control.
I think it already sounds like that you already have an idea, because you've already said you want to nip it in the bud, and you know that during the summer, when you don't have a lot to do, you tend to just go back to drinking, and you've acknowledged that there's a potential issue, and you know it already that when you have a lot of free time in your hand, you tend to turn your free time into drinking, and you worry that you won't be able to fulfill your obligation in the future, so you will come to me already because you want to nip it in the bud. But it sounds like you already have an idea of when you don't drink, and it sounds like you tend not to drink when you're occupied, because when in a lot of your free time you tend to drink. So I think you've already established a very clear line when you don't drink, and you know, and I think you already know what you have to do.
Yeah, I suppose I can see some of those things. It just doesn't quite feel like I know what to do.
Yeah.
But that helps me at least see some of the tools that are there.
That's good, because I guess it must be very confusing when you know that there's something that you like, but in the future it might turn into something that hinders what your goals in mind. So I guess it must take a bit of a toll on you.
Yeah, because that is what I worry about. That's the thing, is that I like it and I want it to be a part of my life for the rest of my life, because it's something to look forward to. It's especially as a social thing, but it's a balance that seems to be kind of elusive for me right now. How to keep it just a good thing that's occasionally a part of your life, rather than it setting a standard for what a satisfactory night is, or whatever, or a good night. So yeah, it's just tough to figure out how to maintain a healthy relationship with it. But it does seem doable. I still feel like, as you say, like I am nipping it in the bud before it's really growing into something out of control. Yeah, I suppose there are certain other elements that have been making it a more common kind of presence in my life, like having certain friends around, and that are kind of similar to me, and I think we tend to feed off of one another, because especially if another person just suggests it, then that's an automatic, like, yes for both, even if, rather than like when you have the conversation with yourself, when it's like it comes up as a possibility, there's still that, even if it's just 90% and 10%, there's still that possibility that you're going to just choose, or at least just stick with one beer or something. With a friend, you tend to, as once it comes up as a possibility, and it seems like a possibility for both people, and that immediately turns into a yes somehow. It just seems to be the way it works. So, having people like that consistently around, I feel, can be a bit of an issue. I don't know how to. I haven't really talked about it with them, whether they see it as an issue, and I find that a difficult conversation to have, because I don't want to imply that I think they have a problem, but at the same time to be the only one that's abstaining when you're with a friend, it's very difficult when it's around, to abstain.
You're very sensitive around the issue because you like these people and they're very important to you, but you also want to do what's right for you, but you also don't want to word it in such a way that implies they don't have an issue, because then you don't want to change the dynamic around you guys. But you've acknowledged already that whenever your friends are over and whenever someone suggests a drink, it's always 100% you're going to drink. So I think you're very knowledgeable about yourself and what are the conditions that cause you to drink, but you're finding a little bit of difficulty because these are your friends. You sound like you very care about the social aspect, like in social work. It's very important to know how to keep your relationships with others, so you're looking for the correct way to bring it up with them, because it seems like you've been thinking about this because you haven't talked to them about it because you're worried that they might think that you have a problem with them. So you're being patient.
Yeah, I suppose so. I do wonder how they would respond if I brought it up as an issue that maybe we both have, and I could see how that might even be helpful to them, because maybe they're having the same thoughts, but are also refraining from talking about it for the same reasons I have been. Yeah.
So is there like any outside resources, or like is there anyone that you think you can talk about this? Since sounds like you're thinking that possibly your friends have this issue. Is there perhaps anyone you talked to about drinking in the past?
I don't know about drinking in particular, but I do have some other friends who've had issues with substance use before, and they've come through them, so I suppose I could talk to them about that, how they went about dealing with that and getting through it. Yeah, I certainly don't feel like it's at the point where I need to seek regular professional help. It's good to talk to someone like this, but I don't feel like I need to attend groups or anything like that. So maybe a friend who has had relatable experiences. Yeah.
Sounds like you already have a couple of resources in mind. You know that, and you've heard some stories from them, and while you know already, you're very observant about yourself, that you know that you don't need professional help yet. but and this is just something you want to nip in the bud, because then you're a very proactive person. You want to do early prevention because, well, you mentioned that you're doing all the stuff you usually need most of the time, and I think that's very indicative that you're very high functioning. And while you see that drinking might be a problem in the future, it's certainly not a problem for you now. So, because then you seem to be coping very well, and you have people that you know that you might be able to talk about it, so you seem very knowledgeable.
Well, thank you.
Oh, it's all you. Yeah,
I mean, it's just a lot of fun too. I mean, that's the reason I don't want to have to address it as a big problem, because then it feels like, oh, you shouldn't have that kind of fun anymore or whatever. But I still want to be able to. But I feel even coming here that like it's kind of labeling it as a problem, and it's kind of now tainting it in like a bad light, and so then when I don't know, I sort of wonder if when I go to it now, I'm going to feel more of a sense of guilt, like I'm doing something bad because I've labeled it as a problem. But I mean, I feel you've helped me see it as not necessarily such a problem, but I still see coming here as kind of a kind of like a change in that regard. Like I'm framing it in a negative way. The act of drinking.
Sounds like that you're very worried that you're taking something that brings you like a lot of happiness, or like it's very fun, as you mentioned it, and it's something that you and your friends have done for a while, and you're worrying about what would you do about if you talked about them, it might change their opinion on drinking, and you're worried about it being tainted and shown as negatively. But it seems like for you, whenever you have drinking, you seem to have a lot of enjoyment and like fun, and I think that's something you want to keep, because you seem like a very fun person, and you very value having a good time with your friends.
Yeah. And I don't want a shadow to be cast over that now. Like each time I'll feel this little like hint of guilt or something because of talking about it in this way.
And how have you been coping with this guilt? Because then it must be very difficult for you to have such a different opinion on drinking that you may or may not know your friends are thinking about.
Well, I really only have the guilt, I suppose, after a bout of drinking or a night, when I look back on it. And then that might last a little while, and then I suppose one way of getting rid of it is by drinking again, because that makes me feel good and forget about any sense of guilt for as long as I'm feeling buzzed or whatever it is. So I guess that's one way of coping, and the other is just talking about it, I guess. Yeah.
Is there anyone out, I guess, since you know that on the one hand, drinking is very, very good, it's very enjoyable, and sometimes you feel a little bit of guilt whenever you've drank too much. and the solution tends to be drinking more because you want to forget about the guilt, and that must be very difficult for you being guilty all the time. Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Next session.